I call to order this meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District number 48 Governing Board. At this time, I would like to ask Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Hart-Wells. I'd like to start with a roll call vote from roll call from my far right, please.
Zach Lindsay.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Patty Beckman.
Libby Hart-Wells.
Julie Snowski. All board members are present. At this time, I would ask for a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved. I would like to make a request.
Please, Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells.
I'd like to pull item L out of the consent agenda, the approval of the 2022-23 supplemental salary schedule.
Any other requests? Okay, I note that we are pulling item L from the consent agenda, which is approval for the 2022-23 supplemental salary schedule. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor to approve the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to read to everybody the meeting decorum. Citizens attending and or participating in Scottsdale Unified School District meetings, either in person, virtually, or telephonically, are required to observe the same rules of order and decorum applicable to members of the governing board and staff. Unauthorized remarks or demonstrations from members of the audience, yells, outbursts, and or disruptions are not permitted. Members of the public are not allowed to approach the dais at any time while the governing board meeting is in session without express permission from the governing board president. And at this time, we are going to move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is student and staff recognitions, celebrations. Dr. Menzel.
Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hart-Wells, and members of the governing board. Tonight, we resume our monthly practice of celebrating some of the many outstanding achievements occurring in Scottsdale Unified School District. We have 3 celebrations to share this evening. Dr. Sackos, our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, will kick things off for us this evening. Dr. Sackos.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Menzel, President Sanowski, Vice President Hart-Wells, governing board members, and Ms. Wagner. I'd like to invite Tonalea school teacher, Dr. Paula Slamowitz, and her principal, Dr. Tamara Jagodzinski, to join me at the podium, please. You may recall Dr. Slamowitz joined us in May with some of her students. As Tonalea incorporates more career readiness classes to align with its AVID program, Dr. Slamowitz stepped up this school year to teach 2 new classes, video production and forensics, in addition to her usual 6th, 7th, and 8th grade honors social studies and yearbook students. Wow. She's the perfect choice to lead the new forensics class, having received her undergrad degree in criminal justice. 60 students are taking the new forensics class, where they have the opportunity to develop research, critical thinking, organization, persuasion, and oral communication skills. In addition, they are gaining insight into a career that combines law enforcement and science to solve crimes. Dr. Slamowitz applied for and is one of just 2 recipients in the nation of a 2022-23 American Association of Forensic Sciences Foundation, the Warren Young Scholarship, and tells us she plans to use the $3,000 scholarship award to bring additional forensic resources to her classroom and further her professional development in the field. Congratulations, Mrs. Slamowitz, and thank you for everything you do for Tonalea students. And to commemorate this celebration, please accept this challenge coin. It's like secret stuff. Like forensic stuff. Thank you, congratulations. We are celebrating a second SUSD educator tonight with Desert Mountain High School criminology teacher Janet Emond, assistant principal John Andrews, and special guest John Arment. Please come forward. Mrs. Emond is in her 7th year teaching Desert Mountain High School's social studies criminology classes, bringing 25 years of high school social studies teaching experience at Downers Grove North High School in suburban Chicago with her to her SUSD in 2016. Mr. Andrews is going to tell you a little bit more about her.
Good evening, Governing Board, Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagner. Congratulations, Janet. Janet, if we could clone you, we could definitely easily get at least four new sections of criminology. Janet is an amazing person. Janet was our MYP coordinator, walked us through the whole MYP IB accreditation process when we were doing that. Janet is beloved by her students. She's a kind, caring, and just passionate person, and I'm so proud to be here as the representative of the Desert Mountain Administration to honor you tonight. So congratulations.
It is Mrs. Emond's efforts to extend her students' understanding of the law and offer them opportunities for civic engagement through the Kids Voting Program and the Fountain Hills Teen Court that we celebrate tonight. Mr. Arment is with the Arizona Bar Foundation and joins us to present Ms. Emond with the John J. Ross Memorial Award for Excellence in Law-Related Education. The late Mr. Ross was a founding partner of a legacy Phoenix law firm, Brown and Bain. The law library at ASU's Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law bears his name. Mr. Arment.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I don't have a big speech prepared, but for her contributions to civic and law-related education, Ms. Emond has helped the students of Arizona and enriched their education, and for that reason, the Arizona Bar Foundation is proud to present her with the John J. Ross Teacher Excellence in Law-Related Education Award.
Thank you, Mrs. Emond, and many congratulations to you and the Desert Mountain students who benefit from your work. And naturally, we get to commemorate tonight's celebration of excellence with a challenge coin. Thank you. I was going to call it an excellence coin. Excellence challenge coin. Thank you.
Congratulations to Ms. Emond and Dr. Slamowitz for the work that you've done to create these amazing opportunities for our students here in Scottsdale. We do have one final celebration this evening that's worthy of not only district note, but also here in Arizona and across the United States. Margaret Cerna, our Elementary Education Interim Executive Director, has the honors of introducing this next celebration.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and good evening, President Zawalski, Vice President Hartwells, Governing Board members, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. It is my honor to close out tonight's celebrations to recognize one of SUSD's many exceptional schools, Cherokee Elementary School. Last week, and stop me if you've already heard this, Cherokee was named an exemplary, high-performing United States Department of Education National Blue Ribbon School for 2022. This adds to their A label and their A+ designation. I told them they're soon going to be known as the GOAT of schools, the greatest ever. Exemplary high-performing schools are among the state's highest-performing schools as measured by state assessments or nationally normed tests. It is also by invitation only. National Blue Ribbon schools serve as models of effective school practices for state and district educators and other schools throughout the nation. Cherokee is just one of 6 schools in Arizona and 297 in the entire nation to receive this recognition this year. As Executive Director of Title I of elementary schools, this is especially meaningful to me because approximately 20 years ago, this young fellow came into Tavon Elementary, very much Elvis Presley-like, sideburns and all, and interviewed for the position, and we hired him. And I'll never forget my assistant principal, not my assistant principal, Cindy Parks, who was my secretary, said when he left, "Elvis has left the building, and we are going to hire him." And we've never looked back. You just continually make me proud. Principal Walter Chandler, former assistant principal Paul Anderson, and the hardworking Cherokee staff put their heart and soul into this effort, not only confirming what Cherokee does well, but also discovering ways in which it can become even a better school every day. That is what we call a win-win. Cherokee provides outstanding education and resources to its 700 students, starting at its early childhood center and progressing through the 5th grade with a continuous improvement plan that supports both children and staff, RTI services to offer remediation and enrichment, Castle and Stanford Harmony to help guide students' emotional growth, and a strongly embedded PBIS program. It all works together to create a wonderful school culture and a safe and supportive learning environment for all students, and one that has the strong involvement and support of a great parent community. We've known for a long time that what a special place Cherokee is. Now the entire nation knows what a special place you are. Mr. Chandler, before I pass the mic to you, I want to present you with a coin to recognize for what you've done.
Thanks, Margaret.
And with that, I pass it on to Mr. Chandler.
Thanks, Ms. Cerna. I didn't know I was going to be speaking tonight. I thought it was going to be all you. Members of the board, Board President, Dr. Menzel, and Gladys, thank you so much for this opportunity to recognize the wonderful achievement that my community was just honored for. I'd like for my staff to stand, please. Come on up, you guys. This is why we're National Blue Ribbon. This staff is outstanding. I've been with this school now for 12 years. My own child, Tegan, went through Cherokee, is now at Cocopa, and my daughter, Brooke, is now in the Force program at Cherokee. So I'm not only the principal there, I'm a parent there, and I couldn't be more proud today to be a parent and the administrator that's on this team right here. We have wonderful students. We achieve at a high level. We have wonderful support from the parent group, and we have some of my APT moms back here that have joined us tonight. The parent support and the commitment we have to learning is second to none at Cherokee, and it's no surprise that we were recognized as a National Blue Ribbon School. Margaret, thank you for all the details about this prestigious award. We couldn't be more proud, and the staff, you guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Congratulations to the Cherokee team, Principal Chandler, to your students, staff, families, the amazing community you have. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you for all the support. Staff, we're going to meet outside for a photograph. Thanks, everyone.
Those were three really nice things to celebrate. We have a few more to put on your radar this evening. While it's still early in the school year, there are some high school students who are already beginning to distinguish themselves. This year we have 9 SUSD seniors who have been named semifinalists in the annual National Merit Scholarship Competition. Sebastian Brock from Arcadia High School, Anna Isabella Dragomir and Kyle Orth from Chaparral High School, Ananya Basakur, Evelyn Chin, Erica Lee, Yuki Matsui, Morgan Taylor, and Andrew Vekich from Desert Mountain High School. These 9 students are among 16,000 nationwide who have been selected based on their junior year scores on the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test and represent less than 1% of all U.S. high school seniors. Next, they must submit an application detailing their academic record, participation in school and community activities, leadership abilities, employment, honors and awards, and they also write an essay. We know that their guidance counselors will be there supporting them along the way in this process. We wish them well as they work to secure this prestigious national scholarship. We'll have to wait until February to find out who the finalists are, but we congratulate them this evening, and that will conclude our celebrations this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. And again, congratulations to Dr. Slomowitz, Ms. Edmond, and the entire Cherokee elementary community. That's all remarkable. And then some future excellence from our other students. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to move on to our board reports at this time. Colleagues, who would like to share a board report? Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells.
I just wish to add my congratulations to the Cherokee Elementary staff, students, and parents and family. They bested thousands of public, private, and charter schools around the country to, for the second time, earn this award. So a hearty congratulations. No subpar there. I also just want to report I have spent the better part of the last month helping to educate the community on what the district additional assistance override is and is not, including attending some of the town halls, which I appreciate that the administration is holding, and bringing into focus really the positive impact that the voters made possible in 2016 with approving the current override. And then lastly, I did get an opportunity to visit and personally welcome Arcadia High School's new principal, Dr. Dansky, and learn more about her process for how she's charting a new vision for the Titans, and then got to catch up with Dr. Michael. Congratulations to he and his family who welcomed a new member this summer. And learned about at the beginning of his second year this year, all of the things that actually he laid groundwork in that first year, despite a pandemic set of obstacles, for STEM-related initiatives that'll be getting off the ground this year. So I'm really excited to see this take off. Thank you.
Any other board reports? Well, I have one. I would like to note that this week started National Hispanic Heritage Month. And I honorably recognize the impact that the Hispanic peoples and cultures has had on our existence in this area specifically, personally, and in our school district overall. Some of that is recorded history on some of our documents that we've been able to share with our public. It's definitely worth for people to take a look at it. I believe it's on our website too. I also want to note that in talking to members in our community, I cannot reiterate enough the importance of parents working as our partners in our schools. Cherokee, Mr. Chandler made comment to that, the success at their campus in part is because of the support of their parents. So in trying to figure out ways always to improve, I would like to suggest that the parents sit and read the code of conduct with their students. and sit down and understand what's in it and what it means when a child is getting ready to go to school. And then remember to have conversations with your children when they come home from school. The education of a child is not just what happens on our campuses, it's also what happens out in our community and in our homes. And I ask all individuals that they respect and support our vision, mission, and values accordingly on an ongoing basis. I note that this last month, we approved the hiring of an additional 200 new employees, welcoming them into our SUSD family. And that's in addition to the 212 we welcomed before the start of the school year. So HR, payroll, employee benefits, site leaders, and colleagues, I thank you for welcoming these members of our family into our communities. Additionally, this month, over 1,980 compensation actions are on the docket this evening to approve. To me, this shows an improvement of rightfully paying our employees for work that they perform on our campuses and with our students. Though we still have a very long way to go in my estimation, it's an indicator that we are heading in the right direction. And so I do thank all of you that have been working diligently on making sure that does get done. And lastly, I'd like to thank the Anasazi PTO, the Arcadia High School PTO, SHAPS Charity, the Charo Foundation, Cochise APT, Copper Ridge PTO, Coronado Marching Band Boosters, CVS Health, Echo Canyon PTO, Laguna PTO, Luca Bartoletti, Mark Sampson, Scottsdale Foundation for funding the Saguaro Innovation Center again, funds for our Sisters in STEM program, SRP for their grants for classrooms, and to all of the individuals in our community who continually and very generously donate their treasures, their time, and their talent and resources to our Scottsdale schools. And with that, that ends my board report. And at this point, we will move to public comment, and that is item 5 on our agenda. Those wishing to address the governing board on information, discussion, consent, action, or non-agenda matters need not request permission in advance. However, we do ask that you complete the digital form, which several of you have this evening, on devices outside on tables in the entryway of the boardroom. There will be a 2-minute speaking limit, and according to Arizona State Statute 38-431.01, which warns that action taken as a result of this kind of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who have addressed the governing board, directing staff to look into the matter, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. No other discussion or legal action is allowed. And I will say who's up first. And when you approach the podium, please state your first and last name clearly, and then go ahead and share your information you'd like to share with us this evening. And then I will also say who's next, so be prepared to come up when the 2 minutes from the prior speaker is finished. First up is Bryson Bowman, followed by Belinda Bowman.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Bryson Bowman, and I'm a student at Desert Mountain, and it's unfair that I'm bullied like on a daily basis. And the administration at Desert Mountain won't do anything about it. It first started last year when a bully started a fight with me, and although we were both suspended, it was like on different times. I got 9 days, he got like 5. He also gave me a bullet with a bullet casing in it with a threatening note. And I was suspended for that, and he wasn't. And still, a year later, I am still facing issues with bullying. And when I tell a teacher, it's always laughed off as like childish behavior. And when I say anything back to them, like I'm always getting in trouble because I say something back. And I know school is supposed to be like a place to learn. I'm trying to do that, but like it just doesn't feel safe anymore. Thank you for the time.
Linda Bowman, followed by Janelle Wood.
Good evening, members of the board. Bryson Bowman is my son. I am his mother, Belinda Bowman. I believe that every child is entitled to an education, and it should be in a safe and productive environment. I am the mother of Bryson. He does attend Desert Mountain High School, and he's been bullied consistently, daily, for the past year. And the administration have done nothing to stop this. The adults in the administration at the school are also taking part of bullying and harassing my child. As a concerned parent, I went to the school to advocate for my son because that's my job as his mom. And the school was very, very unprofessional. I experienced harassment myself. My son and I were called derogatory names, and I've also experienced excessive intimidation and threatening behavior from the administration. No child or parent deserves this. You know, the policies that you all have in place for bullying are not being adhered to. The mission, vision, and the values that you all have here, they're not following them. I don't believe that anybody should go through this. And I would like for us to find a way to work together so that every child feels safe at school. Thank you for your time.
Janelle Wood, followed by Shannon Hayes.
Good evening, Board President Shanowski and Dr. Menzel, and to each and every one of the governing board and staff. My name is Janelle Wood. I'm a concerned Black mother with Black Mothers Forum. I'm here this evening to remind you, governing board, of your responsibility to advocate for the well-being of your SUSD students. It appears your school district's vision, I see it all over, mission and values that promote empathy, inclusion, and unity have not consistently been considered a requirement in many incidences that involve the well-being of our Black children in your schools. Specifically, the administrative staff at Desert Mountain High School appear to struggle in this area. Unfortunately, there have been too many incidences of late, and probably more than we are aware of, that do not align with your written vision, your mission, and your values, especially when it involves your staff's response to reports of bullying and retaliatory remarks by students and staff towards their Black students and parents, in particular, the young man and the mother that are here this evening. We as Black mothers will no longer remain silent while our children are blatantly disrespected and provoked, threatened, neglected, and set up to fail through written and unwritten policies, processes, curriculums, and disciplinary practices that we believe may be rooted in some racial stereotypes. We are requesting that this board fulfill your responsibilities of ensuring that all of your staff fully understand how to carry out your vision consistently and effectively, your mission and your values, and written policies that are supposed to provide the best educational experience possible for all students. I thank you for your attention to this matter.
Shannon Hayes, followed by Susan Winder.
Good evening, President and Governing Board. My name is Shannon Hayes with Black Mothers Forum. I am a Phoenix native, mother, grandmother, and advocate for safe and supportive learning environments for Black students. Tonight, I'm addressing the SUSD bullying policy according to the district website, which states, Every student has the right to be respected and the responsibility to respect others. SUSD and its governing board are committed to providing a learning environment that is free from harassment or bullying in any form. Bullying defined as an aggressive behavior that is intentional and that involves an imbalance of power or strength. It can take many forms such as hitting, kicking, threatening others, teasing, name-calling, excluding others from a group, or sending mean notes or emails. Following the Arizona School Boards Association policy on bullying, JICK, SUSD is committed to 1, providing information and continuous training for its administrators and staff members through regular meetings to ensure that they understand the policy and its importance. 2, making all faculty and staff members, students, and parents aware of this policy and the commitment of the district toward its strict enforcement. 3, remaining watchful for conditions that create or may lead to a hostile or offensive school environment. And 4, establishing programs and practices designed to create a school and working environment free from discrimination and harassment. This has in fact not been practiced at Desert Mountain, has not been a practice of Desert Mountain High School under the principalship of Dr. Lisa Hirsch, who has admittedly described Bryson Bowman as a violent aggressor anytime he was left unprotected and forced to defend himself against bullying and racial harassment. We as Black mothers will no longer remain silent while our children are disrespected, provoked, threatened, neglected, and set up to fail through biased disciplinary practices. We request that this board fulfill its responsibilities of ensuring that the district policies actually provide the best educational experience possible for every child in your school community. Thank you.
Susan Winder's up, followed by Keith Zolman.
Yes, good evening. I had intended to speak tonight about this book, which you used for your strategic planning, which I have read. However, unfortunately, my grandson brought home these 2 workbooks from school, which I believe you recall from last year. When passed out by the teacher again this year, he commented, "We were told we must send these out." Sound familiar? They're not using them, but they do copy some pages and put them on Google Classroom, however, very few. I am not sure where they get the curriculum they are using. It is like last year's, but shows no information on the sheet from where they got it. When the issue was brought up to the teacher and principal, they said publicly, "We are using iReady." That is partially true. The only part they use is MyPath computer assessment, and I suspect that's because the district uses it as assessment. Again, thousands of dollars literally in the trash. That's not even the best part. I then become aware of your sexual orientation exercise developed by your social workers. The supposed purpose of the survey was to reduce homophobia and discrimination. I know for sure that students at Chaparral were asked to fill it out. Education can be defined as the science or art of teaching pedagogies. School can be defined as an institution for instruction in a particular skill or field. It is all about achievement. It is not about indoctrinating students in their sexuality or making sure that everyone feels warm and fuzzy in their learning. According to studies recently done at Harvard University, Arizona is one of the states that was hit worst by the COVID issues with learning. Only 31% of 8th graders are proficient in math. Reading scores are down 4%, math down 11%. Nearly 1/2 of the high school students are not testing at proficient at their grade level. The comment has been made that these are just one score for students, but these are the scores that make Arizona 48 out of 50 states in achievement. I have always voted for extra monies requested in education for schools in every state in which I have lived, which has been 10. However, I will not be voting for your additional money for SUSD. It is being abused, with workbooks being thrown away, teachers not being required to use some of the strong curriculum your curriculum department has selected. They are our students that we have sent to you to educate, and you are greatly failing us. I will encourage all I know to not vote for extra money, and I have meet and greets coming up for candidates that I will share those thoughts with.
Last? All right, I'm used to it. It's cool.
Oh, thank you.
Alrighty. Still tall. Okay. Hi, everybody. All right, I got 2 minutes, so hi, everybody. That's what it is. Okay, so last meeting, Dr. Hartwell's opted to do like a state of the affairs of CGP across the district. So I'm here to give a report for what we've done for Hopi, which of course is my primary focus. But that's cool. So I had a meeting with the principal, Ann Plankovich, and Sarah Torelson, the gifted director. It was a very good meeting. We sat down and talked for a while about the history of Hopi and how it's had a CGP program for decades, or at least a decade and a half for a period of time. So now without the CGP program, this is new and different. Ms. Torelson was pretty good about giving some information we didn't have before about how that process or how that decision was made to chop out and phase out the CGP program, and it seems that the parents did not get a chance to participate in that. And so one of the things that we had talked about is that we would like to conduct an actual public participation process where Hopi families actually come, particularly CGP families, but it could be open to anybody, and actually discuss with district staff about, well, why is this decision made? What can be done differently? One of the things that we'd understood was that the teachers had been polled and did not want to do the multi-age model of gifted. They want to stick to just per age group. So, okay, that's what the teachers said. I don't remember getting an opportunity to talk about that. We were instead instructed this was going to happen from Dr. Brown. So we would like a chance to participate in that, because what seems to have happened is that Hopi had the apple of CGP for a long time, and then the question was, hey, do you guys want a kiwi instead? And the Hopi teachers had said, no, we want the apple. And then instead, the apple was taken away, and nothing was put back in its place. And so the analogy I like using is that we'd like a fruit, if not the same fruit. And that's really our goal here, if you don't mind. So anyway, thank you guys very much.
I note that Board Member Beckman has her microphone on.
Yes, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for their public comments, and at this time, I would ask that Dr. Menzel and Dr. Sakos and whomever is appropriate to look into the accusations made by our young student, his mother, and his advocates this evening, and report back to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Beckman. Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells.
I'd like to ask Dr. Menzel if he and the staff could consider the request made this evening of a public participation conversation to reassess the decisions on the gifted program at Hopi Elementary.
And I would like to add to that request for Dr. Menzel to look into the use of the district-approved curriculum resources throughout our district, and again, share with the board what those practices are and how those resources are being utilized. Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and thank you, board colleagues, for your input as well. At this time, we're going to move on to item number 6 on our agenda, superintendent comments.
Thank you, President Sanowski, Vice President Hart-Wells, and members of the Governing Board. Just a few additional comments this evening. First, this week is National School Security Appreciation Week, so I want to give a shout out to our Scottsdale Unified School District security staff. They work tirelessly and diligently to ensure our campuses are safe learning environments for our students. And I wanted to note that since the Governing Board took action to make the positions 12 months, we went from having 12 vacancies to now having 1 or 2 openings at the present time. So your action seems to have made a difference, and that's a positive thing. Secondly, I want to just provide a reminder that we will be holding an active shooter drill on October 1st. Safety is on the forefront of everyone's mind as we've headed into this school year. And one of the things that we believe is necessary is to ensure that we've worked in close partnership with Scottsdale Police and Fire, as well as other partners, in engaging in an active shooter drill. This will be on October 1st at Kokopah. Participation by SUSD staff will be voluntary. There will be opportunities for counseling both before and after the experience so that we address potential unintended consequences. But the ability to work in concert with local law enforcement officials, with our fire, with other partners in this process will help ensure that we're prepared for the unthinkable that we hope we never, ever have to respond to. Two more items. One, we've been holding, as Dr. Hart-Wells mentioned, the District Additional Assistance Town Hall meetings. We have one more remaining at Saguaro High School on Wednesday, September 28th. These are opportunities where the district can provide factual information about the request that is going to the voters on November 8th and help make clear the benefit to our students as a result of that. Finally, achievement is a topic of concern for all of us, and on October 4th, we will have an extensive presentation on achievement results for Scottsdale Unified School District from this past year. Thank you.
And now we will move on to our information and discussion items. First up, 7A, 2022 Summer School Program Update by Dr. Benson.
Not quite that tall. There we go. Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Dr. Hartwells, board members, Dr. Menzel, and our Gladys, and all here with us this evening. Tonight, we're happy to have this opportunity to report out on the district summer school programs and services SUSD offered during summer 2022. We've structured this presentation to respond to 3 key questions. Can I have us advance the slide? There we go. The first of those, in response to what services and programs we provided, we'll start with a brief aggregate district summary and share the number of programs and the total number of students that we served. And then members of our Ed Services team will provide a closer look at each of our programs coordinated by the departments they lead, sharing the students we served, how they were identified, structures of the program, including teachers, the administrators, and site coordinators and classified team members leading those experiences, the curriculum and instructional materials or resources used, locations, dates, and times involved in each, and the funding sources we were able to use to provide that opportunity. To respond to our second question about how we are measuring our success or our students' progress, our Ed Services team members will share out the quantitative and or qualitative anecdotal data they have and results of their programs. And in addition to that, our Dr. Bachner will share quantitative data from last spring to this fall as an additional metric to consider as we evaluate the effectiveness of our programs, and more importantly, moving forward with our new dashboard as a way for us to continue to monitor the progress of all of our students and provide timely interventions and enrichments in real time during the 22-23 school year. I'll wrap up at the end by responding to question 3, sharing what we've learned to guide our planning for summer school programming experiences for 2023, and make a few purposeful connections to the strategic planning work we've been engaging in this year. With that, we'll get started. Big picture. A list of district programs hosted last summer are captured on the slide in front of you, not counting high school coursework and summer sports camps grades 6 through 12, we involved over 920 K through 8 students in our programs last summer. When we add in the 3,141 students that participated in our high school summer school coursework, aggregately, we provided services to over 4,000 students last summer. In a context where schools and districts across the state identified the struggle of identifying teachers and classified team members to fulfill the roles needed to provide summer school, just wanted to pause and thank our teachers and other team members that were leading the learning in these programs. I also wanted to acknowledge the efforts of the current and previous leadership teams for increasing the compensation to our teachers and our team members, and for our board approving that last summer as well. That recognizes their value at all stakeholder levels to allow us to serve the kids that we did. So with that, I'd like to invite our Ed Services directors and team members to provide snapshot summaries of the programs their departments coordinated. First up is our Dr. Kim Dodds-Karen, our Director of Teaching and Learning, who will report out on Summer Boost and our Summer Bridge programs. Welcome, Dr. Kim Dodds-Karen.
Good evening. This was my first time coordinating Summer Boost, and I learned very quickly that this is indeed a team effort. So in addition to our nutrition services and our transportation department, of course our building services, I want to recognize the support and the effort provided by our 2 Boost coordinators, Ronnie Schultz, who's here today. Thank you, Ronnie. And Holly Scharf, who also served as a Summer Boost coordinator. The work that they provided was instrumental to the execution and the success of Summer Boost. This year, as you can see on this slide, we hosted Summer Boost at Pima and at Redfield. Transportation was provided for both campuses. Our programs were home to 103 students, grades K4, and 19 incredible staff members. Our funding was a little bit different this year. We were able to utilize Esser funds, which opened up a really neat opportunity for us with some curriculum. Esser required us to utilize evidence-based curriculum, so that afforded us a chance to check out some curriculum that we've been interested in and test it. And as Dr. Menzel likes to say, pilot and scale. So we were able to utilize, as you can also see on this slide, evidence-based curriculum from Amplify called M-Class, and we also utilized a curriculum from Scholastic called Lit Camp. We utilized iReady for math. Each program allowed us to utilize small group instruction and targeted intervention for our students identified for Summer Boost, who were indeed those kids who we identify as some or high risk, as identified via FastBridge and iReady. Illustrated here, you can see some students working with the teacher as well as some of the curriculum that was available. We did intensive intervention, 30-minute chunks of time for kids in small groups, 3 to 5 students utilizing that M-Class curriculum, and we also had small group learning with the Lit Camp. Not only was this a great opportunity through Esser, but it also allowed us to reinforce the Move On When Reading initiative for increasing literacy for our some and high-risk students. Math for Summer Boost also ran in small groups. We had a 60-minute intervention block as well as centers. During the center time, teachers were afforded the opportunity to work one-on-one with students. We used the iReady interactive math lessons, fast fact activities for fluency, as well as, of course, math games. JFCS was also integral again this year in Summer Boost. There were daily interactive lessons that our students were able to participate in 30-minute blocks, and they were taught directly from a trained social worker. You can see here in these illustrations there was games, there were simulations, and activities that our students participated in through JFCS. For our students who are a little bit older, we continued to offer Summer Bridge. I'd also like to give a shout out for an opportunity of one of our Desert Mountain High School teachers, Shelby Weiss, who stepped up to serve as our Summer Bridge coordinator. So it's always neat when we get to raise up a teacher for an opportunity like this. Summer Bridge served 159 students. It followed that same time frame as Summer Boost. It was hosted on a few different campuses. We hosted it at Ingleside and Mountainside for middle school. We also hosted at Desert Mountain and Arcadia High School. In addition, we had opportunities via 3 teachers for virtual learning for our students. Again, targeting math instruction for students that we identified based on iReady and FastBridge data. We also looked at grades and teacher recommendations for kids who would benefit from some extra support during the summertime. Curriculum used was the Ready Classroom. We also had teacher resources that were aligned with our standards. And the goal here was to really think about what was it that kids were missing. Based on the data that we were looking at, where did we need to increase fluency? How did we need to assess for understanding in different ways? So authentic assessment, project-based learning allowed us at the end of the time for kids to show through projects and games their understanding of math. I'm going to skip ahead for a second to bring Alice Spangola up. She's going to talk to you about AZ on Track, and then we'll bring Dr. Bachna up to talk about the data associated with our summer programs. There you go.
Without even touching. Good evening. As you remember, AZ on Track was a program that Governor Ducey put into place for all sorts of organizations throughout Arizona. Here in our school district, we ended up with 2 locations for AZ on Track. One was Anasazi serving the north, and Hohokam serving the south Scottsdale area. We had 2 teachers also that stood up and said we would like to try to coordinate this with you. So it was Alex Mikrovitz, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Desert Mountain High School, and Candace Moses from Anasazi. These 2 teachers actually supervised 48 students and 7 teachers. We did provide transportation, although a lot of our little ones did get rides from parents. We focused on preparing students for the upcoming year. So those kindergartners that would sometimes get a little butterflies in their stomach for the first day, this was their first opportunity to try school, and our first and second graders as well. It was so much fun to see them and so much fun to see their parents go from a little trepidation to, okay, have a great time, we'll see you when we get back, and leave their children off to have some fun and some learning. We used the winter and spring FastBridge data for our first and second graders. So what we did was we looked at each of those elements, such as nonsense words, letter sound recognition, and we were able then to pinpoint what students needed what work. We also used M-Class, we used Scholastic Lit Camp, and we also used the iReady math program. As well as using some of the strategies the teachers put into place for nice small groups. And we did have some nice small groups, so it was a great way to get back into the swing of things. It was 2 weeks long, and the students seemed to really enjoy it. We had part of the requirements was civics, and civics to kindergarten, first and second. You might say, well, what was that all about? Well, we actually talked with them and taught them about rights and responsibilities as a student. Why do we have rules? What would be some rules that you'd want to see? How would we treat one another? All those little things, even going into the lunchroom to get your snack for the day. So all of those little routines, they got a little practice at it before the school year began. We also had and continue to have Tonto Creek's Mobile STEM Lab. They spent 2 days at Anasazi and 2 days at Hohokam, and they did hands-on activities with the students too. It was really fun to see, and they seemed to really, really enjoy it. So that was AZ on Track from July 11th to the 26th. Thank you. And we'll go back to Cindy Bachna. Dr. Bachna has all the data. There we go.
Thank you. So looking at our Summer Boost and AZ on Track students, looking at their FastBridge English Language Arts results from spring of 2022 to this last fall that we just finished testing, we saw in grades kindergarten and first grade, we saw an increase in the number of students identified as low risk and the number of students falling into and a decrease in the number of students falling into the high risk category, which is the trend you want to see. We saw the same trend among grades second through fifth grade, where our low risk numbers were increasing modestly from 23% in the spring to 27% in the fall, and our high risk numbers were decreasing from 50% in the spring to 43% in the fall. When you take into consider the same FastBridge assessments, but now looking at math, when we look at our, we saw a positive trend in the number and an increase in the number of students identified as low risk across all grade levels, and a decrease in the number of students identified as high risk from spring to this last fall. And with that, I'm now going to like to introduce Dr. Christine Bono, Director of Early Learning and Community Education, to talk about high school summer school.
Thanks. Good evening. We were really grateful to have Esser support high school summer school again this summer, and just a couple of slides and then a few great celebrations I wanted to share with you. So you can see here for session one, we had just over 1,700 kids, 390 in person and over 1,300 that participated online. And in session two, we had just about 1,300 kids in total, very similar, just fewer kids that attended in person. We offered 22 courses in person and 51 courses online, and we had 22 teachers who taught in person and 36 that taught online. Oh, I'm missing a slide. There is a slide here that would show you our trends historically. basically our enrollment stayed very similar from 2019 on. I think that was a lot of factors, including the support of the Esser funds, that decreased the amount that we charged our kids. We charged them $25 to participate. We did have 41 students that attend high school in other districts that did come and pay that $200 to participate in our program. And a side note, anecdotally, 3 of those 41 ended up enrolling in our high schools. They ended up transferring, so I take that as a bonus. But one thing I'm really proud about is our inaugural credit recovery. So oftentimes people mistake what we offer in summer school in terms of either taking it to get ahead or a grade replacement to credit recovery. So this was a program that high school counselors identified students to participate, either rising juniors or rising seniors from all 5 high schools. So session 1, we had 39 students, and session 2, we had 32 students. 19 of those kids attended both. But the biggest celebration was that this summer we had 3 students whose the rest of their same grade peers graduated in May. They were unable to because of lack of credits, but they got to walk. And they got to put on a cap and gown, and they got to walk in the library, and their parents took pictures, and I shared some with the cabinet this summer. And to see the pride, not only in their face, some of them had a couple of friends that also watched them, and their parents, to see the pride on the parents' faces that they got to take part in that tradition, and they worked so hard. And similarly, we had 9 rising, they're seniors now, who wouldn't have had the amount of credits to graduate on time, and now they do from this program. So Nicole Tarter was our coordinator who helped oversee the credit recovery. It was an online program that the kids came to Coronado to do, so they had that explicit support in person, and they worked really hard. I'm now going to toss it over to Sarah Torrione, our gifted director, who's going to talk about our specialty programs.
Good evening. Thank you. The Gifted Department hosted a 2-week learning adventure at Redfield Elementary School, offering AM and PM sessions. Transportation was provided, and it was funded by Esser. And 84 students in grades 2 through 5 who were invited by a gifted identification or a sibling of a gifted student participated in hands-on exploration units that were designed to ignite curiosity. And 4 gifted teachers, gifted specialists, gifted teachers, focused on critical and creative thinking, emphasizing problem solving, as you can see in some of these pictures. The students had a ton of fun, and there was a 98% attendance rate. With that, I would like to pass it over to Sean Crozier to talk about English language development.
Thank you. Our English Language Development Department, funded through Title III and DSEG, was proud to present our LEAP summer school program this summer. We were able to serve 117 K through 8th grade English learners from all learning communities in the district. We provided transportation to ensure that all of our students were able to attend at Hohokam. We were able to provide 12 classes targeted to students' Azella reading levels over 3 weeks in June. And the success of that program was to be commended. We had a 59% of students increase their oral reading fluency score over those 3 weeks. Our oral reading fluency tested pre and post showed an average of 4.5 word gain in that short period of time. But what was also particularly interesting for me was the visual. I was there every day of that program, and to see the students coming and communicating with each other, being able to learn a little bit about each other from different communities across the district, and bringing in outside resources such as our fantastic Scottsdale Fire Department to come meet with our little ones that were studying about their hometown. And so we had that opportunity for those students. Next, I'd like to talk about our Beyond Move On When Reading program. This is the 3rd year of the program, originally started by Margaret Cerna in the middle of the start of the pandemic. In this program, we had 135 2nd through 8th grade students, most of which participated regularly. They were invited to the program through their reading specialists at our Title I schools based on their reading scores. In all, we provided each student with 12 sessions of online, intensive, one-on-one, and small group targeted instruction. What was particularly interesting about this program is because it was online, it allowed us to have the flexibility so students could attend in July from wherever they were, including places all over the country where they might have been staying with other parents. It also allowed our teachers the flexibility to meet with them on their schedule, and it really, I think, worked well for students to be able to attend. The second thing is that one-on-one intensive instruction meant that students were able to make really strong growth in a short amount of time. We had an 86.8% attendance rate, and our oral reading fluency tested pre and post showed an 18.7 word gain. This program also, we asked our students, parents, and teachers how they felt about the program, and I'll let you read the comments, but the one that caught my attention was from a parent who said, "My son loves to read now." I love hearing that, and I think that that speaks well for this program. Next, I'd like to turn to some of our other Title I supported programs. This is in our eSTEAM program, which is equitable access to science, technology, arts, and math. This program through Title I supported our elementary schools and worked in collaboration with our 21st century schools, and I'll get more into that in a minute, by providing 9 STEAM kits for them to use at any time during the summer, but they also continue to have those kits because they're easily refurbished without significant cost. So they will continue to have these kits and move on from there. But what I like particularly about these is that they provide not only the science, hands-on science education, but they also include a literacy component. As you'll see, many of them come with storybooks that go with the kits, allowing students to have that literacy and science together. And those we operate through our 21st century programs. Title I also supported our fine arts programs in our middle schools. This is the second year for us to have a middle school fine arts camp. This year our fine arts camp was at Tonalea Middle School, and we had an amazing group there, as you can see from the pictures. They met on June 13th through the 23rd, and we had 32 band and string students. They were able to learn in large and small ensemble music. They performed for each other in a recital setting, and there were smiles all around, as you can see from the pictures, as they grew as musicians and learned to perform in small chamber ensembles. And I do want to thank one of the lead teachers for this program is here tonight, and I'd like to thank her as well. Next, I'd like to turn over and look at our 21st century programs. Our 21st century programs have been in Scottsdale for quite some time. They're supported by the Nita M. Lowry 21st Century Community Learning Centers grants through Title 4B. They provide after-school and summer school programs, and this summer we had 6 site-based summer programs, including Ingleside, Navajo, Pima, Tavan, Tonalea K-8, and Yavapai housed at Hohokam this year, but they will be on their own campus next year. Their program focus for 21st century learning programs include academics, including reading, math, and STEM or STEAM, depending on the school. They also include a focus on youth development, providing enrichment courses, and family engagement is a critical component of that program as well. So these programs participated on all of our Title I schools that have 21st century, and we were very proud of the work that they did. Now I'd like to bring up Dr. Williams to talk about our special education programs.
All right, good evening. So I'm excited today to share with you what we were able to provide for our special education students over the summer. Every year we host Extended School Year, or ESY, for students who qualify for this service through their IEP team, either from a regression on a goal area or they're at a critical learning stage. So we had 4 weeks in July to support our students and their goal through intensive interventions. We serviced 45 students in grades K through 12. We had those kiddos on 2 different campuses. We housed our younger students at Navajo Elementary and our older students at Coronado. We had 8 teachers, 14 paraeducators, 5 nurses, 2 speech pathologists, a physical therapist, and an occupational therapist, all supporting our students. And we also had a teacher that stepped up and wanted to help coordinate this program. So Kathy Anderson, one of our adaptive PE teachers, helped to coordinate all of the transportation and the teachers and the students at 2 different campuses. The students had music sessions that were embedded in their schooling. They had movement and motor labs that the OTs and PTs put together for them, as well as those hands-on learning with embedded supports to help maintain those IEP goals. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Christine Bono, who's going to finish up with Kids Club. She's the Director of Early Learning and Community Ed.
Hello again.
Hi.
I'm glad I have a chance to come back up because I would be remiss if I did not thank my summer school folks. Joyce Sawyer and Joe Olney were our administrators who were invaluable and really led this initiative. And Brian Parks from CIMAR was our data person. The amount of scheduling he did, Johnny on the spot. So I would be remiss if I didn't thank not only the administrators, but all of the teachers and the staff who helped with summer school. So I'm glad I had the chance to come back up here. And now I get to sing the praises of our community education programs. So historically, we were able to offer our Kids Club daycare program at 2 locations each summer. Due to staffing crisis and shortages, we were able to offer it at one site, which was at our Oak campus. And having it at Oak, as opposed to having it at a fully run school, really helped because we were able to elongate the summer, have longer hours because we weren't taking up a teacher's classroom who maybe wanted to come in right before school to get her room started or set up. So we hosted 200 kids, and our program went from May 30th till the end of July, and it was Monday through Friday from 7 to 5:30. So it was a great opportunity. Our Kids Club staff, phenomenal after working all year and then giving 120% every day for summer camp, rain or shine. The pictures here, the picture on the left, I helped the pre-K students make rain sticks the day it rained, and the energy that our staff brought, led by Larry Conti, our operations coordinator, and his team of amazing Kids Club supervisors and staff. So that was one of the highlights of the summer. We also, our department also helps facilitate all the high school sports offerings. So oftentimes we forget that there's lots of high school sports clinics that are being offered for kids in 6th through 12th grade. And Nathan Slater kind of ran the charge with his coaches, but we helped process the registration piece and advertising on our website. So we had 90 sports options for students 6th through 9th grade, and this was the first year we really got systematic and thoughtful about putting that information on our website. So we didn't just rely on word of mouth. We really wanted to be inclusive and open that up to any student who was interested in those grade levels. So that was a great opportunity as well. I'm going to bring up Dr. Benson, I think, to wrap us up here and talk about what we've learned.
Thank you. Appreciate that. As has just been shared, we've had and identified many reasons and persons to celebrate for the time and energy given to bring the learning experiences you heard about for our students. And wanted to pause and give a shout out to the Ed Services team. Thank you for putting this together and for affording our kids the opportunities you shared this evening, but also for the reflection and analysis that we've been engaging in about what we've learned and how we'll take steps to capitalize on the opportunities we have identified to make things even better still. We've identified a host of those steps to build on our successes and make changes and improvements for our 23 programming to ensure we're offering the most effective learning experiences using the best instructional curricular resources, and that we avoid competing with each other for teachers and other staff members. Some of those steps include, we've scheduled our first series of planning meetings to begin early in January to allow us to work on with our site leaders and district leaders to determine which programs we'll offer at which campuses, what measures we'll use to continue to identify our students, the funding sources we can braid together,
and which assessments and metrics we can use across our programs to better measure our effectiveness quantitatively and qualitatively moving forward. As one of the coordinators that's here with us this evening said, the recommendation as we involved our persons that coordinated programs and got their feedback just as they were finishing, so it was relevant and timely. Identifying where we can be consistent moving forward to save persons time across the programs while still meeting the needs of specialized groups was recommended to us. And the potential areas to be consistent and create systems for include similar registration forms, attendance procedures, expectations, teacher recruiting, the training we provide to our staff, and such. So appreciated that feedback. Beyond the obvious connections to our strategic plan and Goal 1 academics, we know we have a big opportunity to align our district resources, as is also reflected in one of our goals, to better coordinate our programs to be most efficient for our facilities, transportation, and nutritional service departments, as that impacts the number of buses and drivers, AC costs, and the big picture annual cleaning schedules too. Our summer school programs are one of the unique areas where they actually connect to all areas of our strategic planning. You've heard different members of our Ed Services team talk about the purposeful ways we afford attention to culture and climate, take care of all needs of our kids, and with our innovation and teaching and learning strategic action team too, as we invite ideas that allow us to reimagine schedules and timelines and structures for our learners and teachers moving forward. We know this presentation is closely connected to our Esser presentation and to the accountability presentation we've scheduled for our next board meeting, but we're happy to entertain any questions you might have specific to summer school this evening.
Board Member Greenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Benson and team, for this very thorough report. It's clear to me that we're offering our students a broad range of education opportunities in the summer, including special education, but also music and extracurricular sports activities, which I think is vital. And so I appreciate that we're hitting that. I do want to underscore, though, the point, and I think you've touched on it, about establishing consistent assessments and metrics, because the data that I see here is good and it's helpful. And I enjoy seeing that a change in low risk, for example, on the ELA fast bridge for K1 going from 35% to 62%, while the high risk goes down from 42 to 14%. But outside of that bubble, it's really hard to understand what that means. And I think, one, that points to the need for providing the board before summer school programs the goals that you seek to achieve on these. So, for example, perhaps you set it to be 58%. We actually hit it at 62% for low risk. Great, we've achieved that goal. I don't know if for grades 2 through 5, where we saw, as described, a modest improvement according to the ELA FastBridge results, if we would have hit the target that we intended to set. So I think that's really important, because I think it identifies certain areas where we may need to focus more as a board in providing and allocating resources. I would ask, so these FastBridge results and the results that we are given this data, this pertains only to the students who engaged in the summer school programs, is that correct? It would also be interesting to see kind of how that, and I don't know when the first kind of FastBridge results, how we would be able to compare to the larger student body, but it'd be interesting to see how that tracks, how these improvements track to where other students who don't participate in summer school start off at when they first come back to school, because we know there's a little bit that learning loss. I know people throw out the whole year-round school to address that and all sorts of different things. I'm not sure that's the right solution. I don't know how effective that really is, but just to kind of see, is there a marked improvement, because I think it's an important selling point, if you will, in talking to parents, whether they have high achieving students or they have students who are in high risk categories or need to just kind of get that benefit, is to say, yeah, no, if you do our summer school programs, we really are hitting that. And you're probably looking at these, and I'm probably just repeating everything you've already talked about. But I think for me as a board member, and I'm sure likely for other board members present and in the future, that type of ability to put it in a broader context would be helpful. Beyond that, I think, again, as I say, I think that's great, the opportunities that we're providing students. I really wish more students, if there are more students, again, in the what we learned part, making sure that we're identifying students who really need this and could really benefit from a summer program like this. It would be great if we were able to bring in more of those students and identify them. And I think since we now have the data table that we've put in place over the past year, we can hopefully do that. But thank you all very much for your hard work. It's clear that this was a team effort, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. Vice President Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, President Sinowski. Thank you, Dr. Benson, and all of you who that are here and aren't here that made this possible this summer. It definitely was a lot of work. My questions actually were very similarly oriented in terms of where they were headed, and that was, what were the goals that were set up for achievement? Were those goals met? And since that's already been raised as kind of a way to present this information, it would help for context and impact. I think it would also help understand what some of these programs which ones need to be incorporated into the school year and not just available summer and not just available to certain kids. Some of these programs, to me, look like things that should be part of every elementary school or every high school or every middle school. And maybe not, but that's what it's starting to look like to me. But it'd be nice to have that kind of holistic picture so that it would make it easier to make those efficient decisions on effectiveness as you go along, as opposed to having to recreate, re-engineer structures as you go forward. I will point out an observation, and I pointed this out at the last Esser update to Dr. Bachna. And if we could go to the FastBridge data Dr. Bachna showed, either chart that you're showing shows the same trend. Is that the interventions that are being used right now and supported through our Esser dollars tend to have a bigger impact on the younger learners than they do as we progress into the elementary school. And I don't know if that's going to hold for all of the interventions that we're funding right now. But I raised this with Dr. Bachna because if you remember, Dr. Bachna, we talked about, and I believe it was Sequoia and Laguna, both had done projects, and the way they presented their information, we could see that same trend, that the impact was significant. And I don't know if, I believe at the time it was statistically significant on those two programs, but as the student was older, the same intervention was not moving the needle as much for those students. And we're seeing kind of the same thing here, maybe we are. So my question to you is, and even when we look at this Esser update, is to keep that in mind. If that's the case, then maybe it's time to rethink some of the interventions for the older kids, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th graders that aren't the same for the K through 3 or even 4. Just an observation. I want to also thank Dr. Bono for the credit recovery program. I love that. And as you know, I have a keen interest in this district continuing to hang on to our students who don't get over the line, whether they're 18 or not, or they're not compulsory age, they're 16, 17, and I still feel that our district has an obligation, if they are within our reach, that we get them over the line. So I thank you for that program. I really enjoyed hearing that, and it was gratifying, and congratulations. It was outstanding. And just a last thing, on the Title I programs, all of those programs, what would it take to scale those? Is that something, well, I probably don't have the answer to that, but is that something you're thinking about, scaling those programs beyond?
There are a host of programs. Sherry, do you want to?
I was just going to say, one of the benefits of Title I is it is so focused on only 9 of our schools that it allows us to have that sort of a opportunity to put it in a under a looking glass and see what we can do. One of the disadvantages is that if we find something really great, it then becomes incumbent upon the district to find another funding source, because if we expand it to other schools, Title I no longer can continue to fund it just for Title I. We can't have a program that's funded by Title I for some schools, but by the district for other schools.
I appreciate that, and I understand that but is this proof of concept data is what it looks like to me, or could be used in some of these programs at least as proof of concept data to then scale using the Esser funds, and there's still 2 more years of Esser funds that a significant amount of the budget remains for the learning loss, and that would come in to address the correct point you made, Sean. It would be interesting to hear that analysis if you, I'm sure, are already undertaking that analysis. But thanks again for all the hard work.
Thank you, Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells. Board Member Beckman?
So a couple of questions on the number of students that participated. So if you can go back, I don't know if you need the slide or if you just know this, with regard to our K-5 students for 103 students attended in grades K-4, and that was for reading, or was that for reading and math, or what was, can you go over that with me again and clarify?
Checking to find which one you might be speaking to. 154 was the number we're looking for. Is it summer boost that we're looking at?
Yeah. The summer boost slide that says 103 students.
Dr. Dodds, Karen?
Sure. 103 students attended between the 2 campuses.
Okay, so and what did they, and so this is for reading and math, they did it all, okay. So this data that we're looking at is for just those 103 students?
Correct.
Okay.
For Fast Bridge, it's a combination of AZ on track, which was, I think, was approximately 48 students in addition to the 103, so about 151.
Okay, so I appreciate the hard work. We have, by my numbers in today's report, we have 6,969 K-5 students. So my question is, how many, 103 students participated. Of the number of students that were recommended to participate in the summer, how many took advantage of that? Do we know?
I can provide you that data. I will also share, we had, our grant was written this year as a K-4 grant, not a K-5. So in comparison to previous years, we didn't offer for our 5th graders going into 6th grade. I will also share that while we did obtain 19 staff, we were struggling with teachers, and we had to limit the number of classes per grade level based on the number of teachers we could get.
Okay, so we have similar numbers at the middle school, 159 out of 6,065. So my challenge for us, and question in general, is to make sure we identify those children that need help earlier, support earlier, get the word out to them that this is available, and try to get that participation number up, because I think that's where we're struggling a little bit. I think it clearly works by your data, but we're not getting the participation that we should be getting. The second point to Board Member Dr. Hart-Wells, I agree with her. That middle school drop has always been prevalent, so where do we identify the supports the most? But I think it's twofold, and you're the expert, I'm not. I think those fundamentals not being caught at the early age then as they move up, you've got these students trying to learn both. They're trying to remediate and learn fundamentals they didn't grasp early, and they're trying to keep up with what they're learning now, and it's an impossible task for them. So thank you for answering my questions, but I would challenge us to get better participation.
And if I could add as well, Dr. Benson mentioned one of our lessons learned was to look at all of our different programs, because we're running parallel to one another. So I know early on in the planning phase, Margaret Cerna, Sean, and I met to talk about ELD and Boost, because we're trying to get the same kids. The kids on my list for some risk and high risk are the same kids who are on their list. And so I said, let's blend these together. But at the time, the way their grant was written, which was used to fund ELD, they had a curriculum that they had to use for that grant, and we were going with the M class. So that's a lesson learned for us to get ahead of it, because again, we're trying to get the same kids. So, and we run them at the same time, And also that led to our teacher trouble too, because we're all trying to grab the same teachers. So that's an area for us to work on as a collective team.
Correct. And in addition to that, it's an opportunity for us to be thinking about how we can use, be innovative and offer experiences for kids that might be traveling or teachers that might be traveling, what that can look like. I do appreciate that we had one of our teams solicit the support of an outside vendor, a tutoring service, and got great gains with that. Too. So the one-on-one targeted small group continued attention and support, I think that was an interesting learning opportunity for us there. So we're excited about getting going on identifying how we can braid things together and where we can't based on funding sources too. That's a really important piece of this too, to make sure that we use each grant and funding source as it's intended. But also very excited about the potential and the addition now of our data dashboard, you know, to some of your questions about how we can pull data. It's easy now to identify which kids came to which program, and our teachers would be able to know that. And we haven't been able to do that in the past. So that alone, which kids, which program, and which kids didn't come to any program, and that may have been identified and targeted and invited, we can easily see that. And beyond our summer school programming, then we can be monitoring how our kiddos are doing and providing and embedding the interventions and enrichments throughout the year. So we're excited about our next presentation, which involves more of our data dashboard and our current data. But appreciate the questions that kind of teed up where we're at. It's perfect timing to have it.
Okay. Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells.
Thank you, President Sanowski. You made me recall kind of an overarching request, and that is the impact on if we treat the students who are participating each summer as a summer cohort, say a summer 2022 cohort, and follow their grades through the school year. And this kind of goes to what Board Member Greenberg was pointing out, is the impact on their growth compared to what we might not see for students who maybe were invited to participate but did not. Those bigger picture analyses, and I'd say that holds also for the Esser programs, and I think that is underway, if I remember correctly. Thank you.
And I would like to thank all of you who were part of the summer programs, parents, staff members, teachers, administrators, all of you for putting this succinct presentation together. And I really appreciate the honest conversation about reflection now, starting earlier next time, narrowing in on the effectiveness, and then also expanding and encouraging the expanding of this to other families in our district. And I agree, and I appreciate the conversation that's taken place here this evening, because what we do is, you know, our purpose is to help our students, and this is why this presentation existed. So thank you all for that. Any other questions, board colleagues? Okay. We are going to move on to our 2022-2023 Esser program update. I believe Shannon is going to present that.
Right. Well, good evening, Board President Sanowski, Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells, members of the board, Dr. Menzel and guests. Tonight, we get to talk about Esser again, where we are with the funding with that, and then the programs that Alice and her team have been doing, working with the schools to utilize those dollars. So for the first one, Esser 1 is very near its end. There's about a week left to this grant, and it will be completed. We ran this as of September 4th and had anticipated using the remaining $181,000 for instructional materials. We have received most of those, realized that it's not going to be the full $181,000. And so actually, as of today, we have moved some expenditures from Esser 2 and over to Esser 1 so that we can close that grant up and utilize all those funds, because they don't roll. They need to be spent by the end of this month, which is an allowable thing to do because they're both Esser grants. So we've actually, what you see here, you'll see that we've encumbered $181,000. That's where we were as of September 4th. We have about $80,000 still encumbered in instructional books. Those have been received, so those will be paid here shortly. And then the rest of it came from Prisms of Reality and other instructional materials that we bought for summer school programs or other programs through Esser 2. We're just moved over to Esser 1, so that'll utilize the rest of those funds and use up everything that was left of that $2 million that we originally got back in the spring of 2020. Then we moved to Esser 2. That came next and gave us a little bit more money and a little bit more flexibility on some things, and then we have that money until September 30th of 2023. For that, we really used to address the learning loss to support community education because of the funding loss that they sustained in 2020, 2021. And then the other big part of it is we did retention stipends originally from that fund to continue to attract and retain our staff. So as you can see, we've spent the bulk of that money. There is a little bit left, about $1 million left in there to use up. We anticipate, again, continuing to use that for addressing learning loss this year. Like I said, we did move $111,000 out of that just today over to Esser 1, so that'll put a little bit more money in there to use up. But we anticipate using the rest of it for addressing learning loss with tutoring, instructional materials. And then we also pay a couple of positions out of there, one being Ms. Mangola's position as our Esser coordinator. There is an extensive amount of reporting that has to be done with these funds, which there should be. It's a lot of money that the federal government has given us. And so her role within the district is to monitor how we're using those funds and to make sure that we're in compliance with the state, as well as she has a fiscal support person, although I think that is currently vacant.
No, it's.
Oh, did we fill it?
We filled it yesterday.
We filled it yesterday. So she has a new fiscal support person that helps with getting requisitions in, tracking EPARs, and making sure we're spending that money. So that'll utilize pretty much the rest of the Esser 2 funds, and again, a little bit for summer school. $276,000 will not take us very far this summer, but it'll at least kind of wrap up some of the summer school programming that we can offer to our families again next summer. And then Esser 3 came around, and that's where the big money came in. We were allocated $19 million for that. We have a couple years. That goes until September 30th of 2024. We offered the COVID retention stipends last year for our staff. We did the first half. We wanted to do the second half this year a little bit earlier. However, our payroll staff couldn't manage that and changing all of the salary schedules and going back and figuring out the difference in pay since we increased the pay. So we had to push the COVID stipend just a little bit so that we could get the salary schedules readjusted and refigure out the back pay for everybody on that. So that'll be happening in October, but that second payment will go out to our staff then who have remained here and were here last year. We've done COVID support. One of the things that came into play last year where we really needed to focus some dollars was we needed more help in the office and the nurse's office. They were just inundated with paperwork and having to do contact tracing and whatnot. So we focused some money in that area. So when we talk about COVID support, that really is what did we need for the nurses and what did we need for office support to get them through last year. We put aside money for communications to be able to help us to attract students and staff again, which is really important as we know people stayed home during COVID when schools were closed. And so we're trying to work hard to get those students and families back. So we have money allocated for that. We put a lot of money into facilities. We've done some motor filters. We've done a lot of ABM cleaning in our cafeterias and are continuing to do that as well. And then of course the bulk of it being learning loss and addressing the learning loss needs that we have. Still have quite a bit of money still encumbered and that we're using for that. However, this year we know we're doing a lot of math specialists and reading specialists to be able to address those needs. I think we have that at almost every school, but I know you'll be talking about that more. But that's taking a chunk of that and will continue to be there as the grant goes forward. We did set aside some money for PPE, although that has begun to decrease. We still have plenty of masks and hand sanitizers and other things, although thankfully, I think we're getting to a point where we don't need those masks or, well, hand sanitizer is always a good thing to have at our schools, but, so we're slowing down the spending within that line. We put a lot more money into Soul, and what we really saw is that we had a lot of families that wanted to be on the online learning when COVID originally hit and schools went back in session. However, they've liked it, and for some families that works better than just the traditional classroom. And so we've earmarked money for Scottsdale Online so that we can continue to offer the K-12 programs for those families, as we still have families who are interested in it and prefer that style of learning. Summer programs being huge again with summer school. Technology, we've had needs that came up because of the new world that we're in, and so we've got technology money set aside for Dr. Watt as needed. And then one thing we did different with this grant that we didn't do with the other ones is we allocated a portion to go back for indirect costs, and so we've set aside a little bit of money for that as well. So with that, you know, we've spent about $5 million of that. We know we're thinking we'll spend about another $5 million of that this year. But again, this is money that's got to last us until 2024, and we'll have to start to look at when that goes away, the grant starts to end. What do we do with the positions and the programs that we think we might want to keep, and how do we fit that back into our budget in other areas? So I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening again. So Esser 1 will begin with, remember Esser 1 began in 2020 when the pandemic first hit, and we were using those funds primarily for mitigation measures, PPE, continuation of pay for when we were not in school. Recently, though, as Shannon said, we had a little bit of funding left over, and I worked with our math coach, and we purchased manipulatives for all of our math needs at schools. So it is there to support the current math program so that students really can have a hands-on experience, so they can add to their curriculum and extend their curriculum where needed, but they can also use that as a reinforcement and a support. Getting that hands-on is going to be a very valuable thing for them. So every school in K-5 will get a grade level math kit full of manipulatives. They'll get dry erase easels and boards, and you should come by MDA Building B and see the walls and forts we've built with all the boxes that we have. So we're anxious to get those in the hands of the principals and of the staff as well. So Esser 2 was the next installment of funds, and those were also used to address not only the mitigation, the PPE measures, but also the retention of staff again, and then the continuation of pay during some of our remote learning, as well as some of our new interventions such as iReady. And then in Esser 3, as Shannon mentioned, was the big bulk of our money, and that is something that we are continuing to work on, and we amend where needed. But this is the last grant for the schools as we try to rebound from the pandemic. One element I spoke briefly about last year was the need to have set-aside funds in Esser 3. Esser 3 states that 20%, at least 20% of your funds must be set aside to really address those learning losses by those students whose population were most impacted by the pandemic. So here in our district, we've used those 20 that 20%, and we've actually gone a little bit above. We went to 35.5%. And we have purchased some core academic interventions. As you saw, we purchased M-Class, which is a Tier 3 type of intervention. And we also funded many of our summer learning programs. As you saw, I think they all stole my thunder there. And we continued to support tutoring. We really wanted to continue our varsity tutors, as we know that for some of our students, especially our middle and high school students, it really worked well with their schedule and with their unique needs for some of those advanced level classes that they were taking. So we continue to support that. We also continue to support the tutoring. It is taking a bit of a different look this year than it did last year. This year, the requirements have gotten much tighter. In other words, we have to meet the definition of what the state and what the federal government calls as high dosage tutoring, which is tutoring that's consistent with the same students, and it's 2 to 3 days at least, and it's 30 to 60 minutes each session. The groups can no longer be huge groups. They have to be under 8 in a group, and when you're working with the younger students, they're looking for under 4 students. So we're really looking at that. The teachers that are, and the schools that are producing these tutoring programs will need to show some type of progress monitoring. So if we use our FastBridge data for the fall and even last spring, they can progress monitor their students using that data, and then they can do some intermittent testing just to see if the program is working for them. So again, with our SUSD evidence-based interventions that count for that 35% that we're using for set-aside funds, we have put into the grant that we will fund 6 reading specialists and 6 math specialists. I know we sat here last year and we had a difficult time with the math specialists, and I wish I could say all math specialist positions have been filled, but they are not. We have 3 filled, and we still have 3 remaining. What we found were many of our applicants were retired engineers, retired architects, so it's just a different type of population than what we would need for our students that are struggling with math concepts, but we're still looking. We still continue to repost so it goes up to the top and perhaps becomes a little more visible. Tanalia just got theirs about 2 weeks ago, wonderful mathematician. We're including the iReady interventions and assessments, and this was really important for us to make sure that we do spend a little bit of time looking at the whole iReady curriculum, that it's not just putting a student on the computer and they go for 20 minutes a day, but we're really following up with that small group intervention with the teachers and that small group support, so the teachers can continue to monitor the progress those students are making. We've expanded our use of Fountas and Pinnell in the level literacy intervention. If you recall, Tanalia last year, our 1st and 2nd grade students used it, and we had great results. And I spoke with Principal Hodo over at Pima, and he is interested in there, and we've purchased the materials from Heinemann for Fountas and Pinnell LLI. It's a wonderful program. High dosage tutoring, as I mentioned, is continuing, and along with the option of varsity tutors. We continue to fund the summer programs, and we'll be looking again to see what are the programs that we're going to fund, which ones showed a good impact and a return on our investment, and then how can we make that better to show progress and show achievement. Jewish Family and Children's Services will continue to receive funding through Esser, as will our MTSS behavior specialists that I'll be speaking a little bit about next slide. And then we continue to have some funds left over from last year, so any schools that were unable to schedule the mobile lab with ASU and Tonto Creek will have an opportunity to schedule that should they desire to do so. As Shannon mentioned, the communications department is trying to recapture our student enrollment and also attract new staff. So they will be receiving some funds from Esser. We continue to provide funding for mitigation measures. This includes the need for additional staff from ABM to help clean during our lunch hours. Air quality continues to be a concern that we want to address and that we have addressed in the past, and we will continue addressing it through the purchase of various filters. Again, as I mentioned before, attracting and retaining quality staff is very important to us, and that is why we had retention stipends, not only for last year, but for summer school as well. And this year, professional development, this is something new that we have not talked about, but all teachers in K through, I believe it's 3, need to be trained in dyslexia and reading foundations. So I know that Diane Murphy has brought one cohort all the way through the training, and as we spoke, we thought it would be a great use of ESSER funds, so we will be spending some of our funds with 50 teachers receiving the training and certification for dyslexia training. MTSS, as you probably saw in the strategic plan, as well as interwoven in everything that we're doing here, continues and is starting to be take shape. We're working as MTSS stat groups and formulating what our MTSS model looks like and how it's going to operate and what is needed. So we have hired one MTSS specialist. She is a person that worked as a crisis interventionist, I guess that was her title, and she is now as our MTSS person. We will be hiring another one once we really get an idea of exactly what those needs are. The behavior specialists have really been proven to be so valuable already. These are 2 individuals that have extensive behavior experience, and they have already really been very valuable within the classrooms. And our MTSS professional development, we are using some of our funds to help fund our principals who would like to have some professional development with their staff, looking at their student data, developing their tiers and systems, and we'll continue to have that professional development. And of course, educational technology, we have reserved funds for student devices as well as any type of materials or equipment that our staff may need to help provide that new experience in learning. And we continue to train our staff in various needs, but the most current one is our cybersecurity. So that has been very interesting to learn all of that. And with that, I will take any questions you may have.
Board Member Beckman?
I just have a fast question. Are we making summer school free again this summer? You may have already said this and I might have missed it.
It's our intention to at least, I don't know if we're going to be able to have the funds to make it free for all of high school. We're going to take a look and see what might come up during the year, and we'll be able to probably make that decision by January just to see where we're at.
My personal opinion, I think it's a great use of ESSER
Yes.
funds. I think we have a cohort that was 8th and 9th graders that were greatly affected by COVID and learning loss at that time that may have some grade replacement to do or credit recovery to do. So it's definitely aligns with what this line item should be used for, but that's me. Thank you.
Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells?
Thank you, President Sanowski. On the high dosage tutoring, so I note that Math Matters is on the consent agenda tonight, and that's a math tutoring service. Can you talk to how that interplay or compares to varsity tutors or the other programs that are being offered by the individual schools themselves with teachers?
Sure. Well, I believe the Math Matters is more in the coaching line and coaching arena for math than it is for the student tutoring. Am I correct in that? Dr.
Staff
Dodds is
coaching?
for math coaching, our math coach.
For helping staff members?
Correct.
Got it. So supporting staff members.
Okay, yeah, that's not what their website says. Okay, and then the question on the dyslexia professional development. So that, what you referred with K through 3 was the state law that was passed that K through 3
Correct.
Teachers have to be trained. So is that, when was the decision? Have we been doing that with the Esser funds, using it to fill gaps in what the state's not funding for what they're requiring us to?
No, we have not. This is our first venture in doing that because it's such a wide initiative and because it's such a valuable skill and teaches so many different strategies on your beginning reading. We felt that it was a very good use of funds.
And that's in bounds, I assume? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I checked.
Thank you, Alice.
Any other questions before I ask mine? No? Okay. On one of the slides, it's titled Set Aside Funds for Evidence-Based Interventions, and it talks about targeting and addressing the needs of underrepresented subgroups. How are we identifying those in our district?
So the
K through
state,
12.
right, the state has those different subgroups, and we can find that through the demographic information that we have for each student.
So we have students in our district already identified as those underrepresented subgroups.
So it would be an underrepresented subgroup in the eyes of, where we're talking with this, would be something like low income or second language learners.
Okay, so not necessarily academic performance in our district.
No, what they're saying is that these subgroups have been identified as students who have been shown to have a greater impact or been more impacted by the pandemic than other students, than their peers. But that doesn't mean that we are just only servicing them, but we are being very mindful that we want to give them the opportunity.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or?
Yeah, no, I understand what the, what some of these underrepresented subgroups are. I'm asking more from an academic perspective, and are we identifying and labeling groups of our students as like subgroups that specifically are mentioned? I know it's based on the U.S. Department of Ed categories, but when we talk about disproportionality of effectiveness by COVID, it could be all sorts of other things too that are not included in the USDE information.
Correct, and that's why we look at all students, but we want to give top priority to those students that may fall into that subgroup as defined by the Esser guidelines. That does not mean that other students would not be considered should they have the same struggles academically as those other groups.
Okay, good. And then there was I do realize that this recovery is not going to happen overnight. The pandemic affected people in many different ways, our students and our families and our community, and getting them back up to grade level or surpassing grade level expected performances is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take all those folks that have been mentioned tonight with the parents and staff and students themselves, which kind of leads me to a concern I have, and I've discussed this with Dr. Menzel in the past about what's best for learning, for student learning and student success. We know that our students do a better job with face-to-face contact with a certified instructor. So that being said, it was mentioned that some families are finding it, are very interested in our Scottsdale Online. I see this as, at some point, we may have to be saying, because I see our governing board as being responsible to provide that rigorous education. World class is what we're saying we want all of our children to receive. But at some point, do we have to reach out to some of those families that are choosing online if in fact we're proving it's not quite as effective or intensive education program? Maybe they're just not getting the same out of it. It's not about the quality of instruction or the standards that are set for the kids participating, but there's a difference between a screen, anyone who's taken classes online versus with an engaging instructor could attest to that. There's a difference. So is there going to be a point where we say, are we going to identify that group as a subgroup of students, a cohort, and follow and track their success compared to the students that are on our campuses?
And which is a very good thought and consideration and question. We would look at any cohort of students, and now these would be the students that perhaps are in their second year, maybe third year of Scottsdale Online, is looking to see what does the trend data show us. Does it show us that they are growing at the same rate as in person? But I think that's something that I'm sure Scottsdale Online is looking at to see how are those students progressing, and if they're not progressing, what are we going to do about that? So.
Yeah. Dr. Benson?
Appreciate that our Alice is.
Hello.
Appreciate that our Alice is responding to our sole questions here this evening too, but to speak to or respond to your question about kids' progress in an online learning environment, it's very kid dependent too. There are some kids and families that absolutely it caters to, and they can do very, very well in an online environment. So we wouldn't want to make a broad generalization that it's bad for all, but it's something that we monitor, and there's ways to get kids connected differently off screen in e-learning type environment too, and we've got a new director that's looking at making connections with kids and has the personality for that too. So appreciate the question, but just want to make sure we weren't generalizing it as deficit as compared
No, and that was not my intent. My intent is to make sure every student in our district is provided that world-class education, and maybe even comparing the students who are choosing to be online, especially if they're older students, prior experiences and success versus the last few years, maybe examining that. I think it is really important for us to be progress monitoring all of our students in our district, and I appreciate the teachers that are constantly trying to individualize instruction for their students in their classrooms. I note that Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells would like to interject here.
Thank you, President Sanowski. I wanted to also comment along the lines of Dr. Benson. My experience in talking with parents that choose Scottsdale Online Learning, it is not necessarily perceived as an inferior education, quite the opposite. And there are certainly, I teach online in a live asynchronous class, and you most certainly, certain types of students can still learn at high levels complicated content, and even the younger ones. And I've met with some of the teachers in Seoul, and they're certificated, they have 2 masters, they're able to engage their students. So I have a very different view of Scottsdale Online, actually. I think that it is an opportunity to drive enrollment outside of our district, and for certain types of students that maybe are more athletically driven. For example, it gives them more flexibility. There was some testimony that was presented this evening that the reading tutoring or the math tutoring that was actually virtual wouldn't have been able to even access some of these students had it not been offered virtual. So I think there's some value here. And so I also just want to caution painting a monolith here just because we kind of refer to it as an alternative school. I don't. I see it as a 6th district learning community. And I hope that we continue to look at it that way.
And that we've had Scottsdale Online Learning as an option for many, many years in our district, prior to COVID. I just am very aware of the increased use of it, and understanding why people choose it. I believe in choice. It's a beautiful thing. So I just want us to make sure that our students are being successful as well.
And I'm sure they'll continue to be progress monitored as well and assessed to see how they're doing. And like with all of our programs, we're going to keep striving to make it the best it can be. So I have no doubt that Mr. Noonan's going to be doing the same thing for Seoul.
Super. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Welcome.
We will move on to 7C, the aggregate expenditure limit, conversation led by Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Sanowski. We've discussed the aggregate expenditure limit before, but just by way of reminder quickly, it's a provision that was adopted by the voters in Arizona in 1980 that capped how much the state could spend on education in the aggregate for district public schools. Charter schools didn't exist at the time, so they are not included in the aggregate expenditure limit. There have only been a couple of times in our state's history where the limit has been exceeded, and in that case, the Constitution provides an opportunity for the legislature by 2/3 vote of both the House and Senate to override the limit and allow districts to spend the money that was appropriated by the legislature. So it's an interesting phenomenon. The legislature establishes a budget for K-12 education every year. They know what the state has available in its coffers. They make that available to schools. Then subsequently, after we've already adopted our budget, sometime in November generally, the Arizona Department of Education completes the aggregate expenditure limit calculation and determines whether or not the amounts across the state of Arizona, so it's not just based on each district on its own, but it's the aggregate, whether or not it exceeds the limit that was identified in the 1980 Constitution. As we discussed last year when the limit was exceeded, there are a lot of things that are different now than in 1980. So arguably, this is due for an overhaul, but that's not going to happen. The earliest it will happen will be 2024. So in the meantime, we're staring at a similar situation as to the one we had last year, that if the legislature doesn't take action before March 1st of 2023, our district, as will every other public district in the state that's not charter, will have to amend their budget to reduce the budget by the amount that we're over on a percentage basis. So it's applied, I think the estimated percentage now is 17% across the board, so whatever that represents for us, and the estimate for us is $28.4 million. Shannon would have to come back to you with a budget recommendation that reduces our budget by $28.4 million in the last quarter of this school year. In fact, with only 2 months of school remaining. $28.4 million represents 6.5 weeks of education in Scottsdale in terms of paying our people. So it's not inconsequential. During this last budget cycle, there were conversations, because it's the first bipartisan budget that we've had in a very long time. Not never, but in a long time. And during that process, there was an agreement made, at least it was reported, that the governor agreed that he would call a special session of the legislature to address the aggregate expenditure limit. It was known that with the nearly $1 billion in new funding for public schools, that would be required, but was not something that they were going to address before sine die at the end of the last session. So fast forward to where we are now. There are many people who have reached out to ask for a special session. We still don't have one promised. Some reports are that the governor has said there are 3 conditions, which were not necessarily the case at the time of the handshake agreement before, but that would include it has to happen. So some sense of urgency. 2, that we have a support from the leadership in the House and Senate. And 3, that you can confirm that it will pass. 2/3 vote means 40 representatives and 20 senators. So those are the things that people are looking at the present time. There are also, there were some reports that the governor wanted to wait until the lawsuit related to Prop 208 was concluded in its entirety. That has happened. so that's no longer an issue. Some others have raised new questions about whether or not the referendum on ESAs gets on the ballot because signatures have been collected, whether or not that was a deal breaker. Wasn't part of any of the agreements that have been reported back from individuals who were in the room. So there are a lot of moving parts and pieces here, and some of it's political in nature, but the real impact on local schools, including Scottsdale, is that unless the legislature takes action to override the expenditure limit, we have to reduce our expenditure total by $28.4 million in the very end of the last school year. So while the governor encouraged us to spend the money when he made his budget statement, signed it, talked about the historic increase in public education, it was a $1 billion historic increase, and this should be spent on classroom teachers. That all could go away in a heartbeat if action isn't taken. So you can wait until February 28th of 2023 if you choose. That puts all districts in a very difficult position. ASBA has sent out a draft resolution that school boards could consider related to the potential of calling on the governor to convene a special session. And given some of the conversations we had, I thought it might be appropriate to just put it on the table for the governing board and remind people of why it's important. I've had some business people say, well, didn't we just do this? And the truth is we did. And not only do we need it done this year, it will need to be done again next year because there's not an appropriate rebasing structure in the 1980 constitutional provision to allow it to get reset at that higher level. And so the inflationary adjustment is much smaller, and it's ripe for revision. Many people would argue it should be repealed, and that would be a nice thing, but I'm not sure it's likely. But modernizing it makes a lot of sense. And so I'm interested in any questions or thoughts you might have on that.
Board Member Greenberg.
Superintendent Menzel, thank you for that information. And I think this board has repeatedly stated that it supports the override on the aggregate expenditure limit. I don't know each individual board member's views of repealing that. I personally would like to see it repealed. In general, because this relates specifically to the financing of the district, and without these funds, I really don't know what Scottsdale Unified School District or any school district would do in the final 6 weeks, because really the only alternative is either to base our budget right now as if we do not have those funds, in which case we would not be able to offer the salary increases, as an example, that other districts are offering. I mean, it would put us at a very difficult position. So planning for this is important, but I don't think it can be planned at this time. I would be okay with a resolution. We don't generally do it in this district. And I would want to make sure that our council provides, advice on this as to what perhaps the legal posturing is, because I know a lot of districts do this. On the other hand, I'm aware that there is a line of thought out there that organizations, local districts and organizations that are legislative in nature, like school districts, do not necessarily have the authority to pass resolutions, and I'd also want to make sure that this doesn't in any way conflict with the use of school resources for political purposes. So I would want to make sure that we get some information on that, and again, it wouldn't necessarily comport with the historical trend here in this district, but again, as it directly relates to our financing and ability to provide an education, if we do not receive this funding, we would be in very serious trouble. So I think I'd be supportive as long as all our ducks are in a row, and that's my personal view on that.
I did ask Jennifer McLennan before she disappeared for a little while, because I know how she feels about resolutions, and she reiterated how she feels about resolutions, but said many districts are moving forward with this, and this one doesn't give her heartburn because of the specifics, but I think it would be appropriate for her to answer those questions at our next meeting, should the board want us to put that on the agenda.
Thank
any other questions at this time on this subject? I appreciate the questions, and I would like to receive more direct counsel on this specific matter. Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Yes, go ahead.
It's September 20th now. When is our next board meeting?
4th, October.
October 4th. Could we try and aim to have that discussion at the October 4th meeting? Because it's a pressing matter, and I realize we don't have I don't believe we were given a copy of the resolution in our materials. I don't see it.
One has not.
Okay, yeah, so if we could,
From AS.
Yeah, from ASP.
oh, it's just from the.
skeleton, yeah.
Okay, yeah, if we could just receive what the general wording would be, and that way we can get this done as quickly as possible if the board decides to do that. Thank you.
Okay, seeing that there are no other requests to add to that, we're going to move on to information discussion item D, communication with the governing board. Dr. Menzel and I are going to request, we have a conversation on this, recognizing that one of our many tasks is to support the academic and personal success of every student. Communication is a vital tool, and we as governing board members and the superintendent, and I know staff members too, it's very inconsistent, the practices on who's being communicated with and on which subjects. There are times where one governing board member is included in a communication from our community and no one else is included, whether it's they sent separate messages or they just only sent it to one person in the district. What we'd like to do is to clarify effective and efficient communication so that there's no misunderstanding, and there's not a lot of people here that would be communicating to us, and I think those that are here do communicate to us effectively. But this is more for putting on record what that expectation is. Dr. Menzel, would you like to take the lead on that?
So we included board policy BHD, and to build on what President Stanowski said, there are times where something will be sent to her as board president or to the president and vice president, and only to the two of them. And the governing board has authority to act on matters pertaining to the district when they're seated in a properly called meeting, noticed with something specifically on the agenda. So emails asking for specific action on a particular item to one or more governing board members isn't something that is within their purview to act on. Now, they can send the information to me. They hire the superintendent to lead the district. What we recommend in terms of our communication protocol is that individuals start as close to the source of the problem as possible. So if it's a classroom issue, start with the teacher, then go to the building principal. If that doesn't work, then you can move up the chain of command. There are times, and it references it here, a community member who exhausts the opportunity at various administrative levels may communicate with the board in writing. But sometimes people like to jump right to the governing board. Then if the governing board member sees that I'm not copied, they'll often give it to me. We push it back down the chain of command. That's not particularly efficient. So there are ways to address what I think some people want, and that is to make sure the governing board knows that there's something of concern. They don't know what they don't know until someone tells them. We've got 21,000 and some change students. We've got 29 buildings in an online school. I don't know everything that's happening in every building and every classroom. And so when there's something that's surfacing that's a concern, rather than jumping to the governing board, we encourage our families to start as close to the problem as possible. If you don't feel like it's getting addressed, then move up the chain of command. There are times where it might be appropriate to send something to a principal and copy the superintendent on that. That helps ensure that there's an accountability loop built into the conversation. But sometimes I think people think the governing board they're the ones who can just unilaterally act. Unless it's on an agenda properly noticed, they don't have any ability individually to act separately. We just wanted to make sure that we clarify any confusion there, because sometimes I think people assume that. And the governing board members, all 5 of them, want to do what's best for students. They want to make sure that we're living into our mission, vision, and values. That's important to every person at this table. It's important to our leadership team that's here. It's important to our frontline staff. We always have opportunities for improvement, and when we've fallen short, we need to do what's necessary to make it right, but making sure that the communication is clear helps make it more efficient in this environment.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Board Member Greenberg.
I think for me, the issue is primarily a technological one, because on the one hand, we are elected officials, people can communicate with us, and we choose to be here. We ran for this office and we choose to be here, but there is the practical reality that, this isn't a job, we're not paid, we don't have staff the way that Congress people or state legislators do, so when you are emailing us, you are emailing us directly. You're not emailing just a staff member who's churning these out. I will say that in my line of work, I deal with thousands of schools and school districts that I have to communicate with on a routine basis, and I review their websites or review how to contact certain officials if I need to speak to the superintendent or their counsel about a legal issue. And one thing I've noticed is that many districts now do not list the email addresses of their board members. They have either a form that you complete, so one of those annoying, you have to type your name in, type your email address, and write it there. You can't create a separate email. Some of which do have a prompt, click here, and have you first spoken to all these other people? Yes. Okay, and then you go through it. I know that can be a bit frustrating for me, but also members of the public in general. But I find that it's very, I remember when we were reopening our schools and presenting those plans in September of 2020, I think we received over 600 emails. I responded to about 200 or 300 of them. And most of them are yelling at you why you haven't responded sooner, which I understand. There's frustration there. People want answers. They want information. But I think if there was some sort of barrier there that really redirected the communications either to the relevant department or to us, it would help out a lot, because when people do email us, and as you pointed out, only email us, they do not include the superintendent or the administration or other staff members, it may be that we don't see it or respond to it for a couple days because we have jobs, we have other responsibilities, there are other things going on. And in that case, now you've emailed us and you've not heard anything back for more than 24 hours. That's very frustrating as well. So I don't know if there's a technological change or an informational change on the site that would either funnel that information so that if they do fill out a contact form with the body of their message, it will go to everybody every time, including the superintendent or administration, and then we know as a board that we have the ability, if we want, to respond individually to that emailer, but that we are confident that the superintendent or the relevant parties have already been included, and they are the ones who are going to respond, on all these emails. That's kind of where I'm thinking. I know that PVUSD, I think, has a pretty standard thing that if you email the board, in general, the response will be from the superintendent and not from any board member. So I don't know if that's the way we want to go, because it is a lot to read through and respond. I want to be responsive, but time constraints are a lot right now.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. I don't know if we have personnel capacity to support like a help desk, if you would. I don't know that.
So I think there are a couple of ways that we could approach this. I do think the PVUSD is one that's a possibility, so that it could be sent to one or more governing board members, but the superintendent can respond. What I know to be true, not unlike the request after public comment tonight, is report back on what the actions were addressing the concerns. And that can happen in any number of ways. It can happen through legal counsel because we have information that might be protected by FERPA, for example, and so we'll ask legal counsel to draft a response. Or it can be just via email, could be through one of our board memos that we send, or it might be a presentation scheduled at a subsequent meeting. But the issue is, how do we respond in a timely manner? How do we ensure that the concern gets addressed to the proper person? And for emails that come to the governing board, they rarely identify all of the steps that a person has taken before they come to you. And so that becomes part of the problem. So you can assume that everything you read in the email is the whole story, but from an administrative perspective, we have to go back to the source and find out, what other information is relevant related to the concern that's been raised here. What have we done? What solutions have been put in place? Has it been consistent with governing board policy? All of those kinds of things. If it's general communication, we do have other vehicles, especially Let's Talk, that allows for that to come in. We can track how long it takes. We can easily assign it to any one of the staff members that's best positioned to respond to that. And there's an accountability mechanism built in, so we can see how long it takes to respond, what the customer satisfaction score was, all of those kinds of things. So I think for general communication, we put other tools in place that work. When it comes to the governing board, it's usually someone who has a significant concern. And so I'm not dismissive of the concern. I just want to make sure to Mr. Greenberg's point, it may not get responded to as quickly by a governing board member because you all have other jobs besides this, and this one isn't a paid position. There are other people in the district that have paid positions that are responsible for responding, and so we need to make sure it gets to the right person as quickly as possible.
And to add on that, sometimes there is a quorum of governing board members that are included in a particular message, and we can't respond to the other governing board members for violation of open meeting law if we include the majority of the board. So I think that's something really important for the general public to know, that if I respond back to an individual and I have left out intentionally the other governing board members, I'm responding as one of 5 individuals on our governing board, and it is not the end-all be-all of a message. It is my feedback and my input as an individual. And I think that's really important for the general public to also understand that the open meeting law rules that apply to us here also apply to us out in the community and with telecommunication. So I often will remove governing board members from my reply to an individual, not to leave them out of the communication, but because of the laws that are in place. So I want folks to know that as well. I'm responding to their interests and their needs, and then often I will send it to Dr. Menzel or whoever else I think should see the information, and I will follow up, generally speaking, with an individual in their community saying, I have forwarded this to this person, and I've CC'd them on this, and they will communicate back to you. So just to keep that communication alive, but for them to understand I'm not deflecting the issue, but I don't know all the details in order to respond. So there are employees in our district who are experts in the areas that they're hired in, and for me, I think that's the appropriate person to then respond to a parent issue. Board Member Beckman.
Just a quick note to add that I know many times when people email us, they don't think about is we are the appeal. Meaning, and when you talk about a student discipline hearing or something along those lines with regard to the code of conduct, many times those will come before us in an executive session. And if we have heard about every single thing that has gone on via an email or something along those lines, it kind of puts us in a very awkward position. So we just need to communicate and make sure people are aware that there are times that it's not appropriate to go straight to the governing board with the matter.
Great point. Thank you. Are there any more comments on this subject? Okay. Then we are going to be moving on to our consent agenda. And there was a request to discuss Paul L, approval of the 2022-23, and then we'll discuss that afterwards. Okay. So I am going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
All in favor to approve it as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And now we are going to have a discussion on the approval of the 2022-23 supplementary salary schedule. Dr. Hurtwells?
Thank you, President Sinowski. So the reason that I had asked this to be pulled was so that actually, I had asked Dr. Menzel to provide some context to the community, because when I was going through this document and the job descriptions, or what descriptions we were given, and the stipend amounts, there seemed to be some maybe perceived overlap and without a lot of context. And then just it wasn't clear where the stipend numbers were originating. And as with everything here in Scottsdale, it has quite a history associated with it. And so I was hoping that Dr. Menzel could provide some very important context about the stipends, their origin, and where this is going.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Hart-Wells. I'm going to ask Alexis to come to the podium, although if she's lucky, I will cover it all sufficiently, but if not, I have a lifeline. So every year, the board approves the supplemental pay or stipends to individual staff members. You approve those on regular agendas. One of the projects that Alexis has been working on for some time now is to get that all combined into one document so you can see what you have here in front of you. One of the things you'll notice very quickly is you see some things that it's like, well, why do some leads get more than other leads, and how was that decision made? We had a cabinet meeting earlier today and had some of those conversations ourselves. You mentioned history within the district. A number of years ago, we had department chairs. The department chairs got paid based on the number of teachers in their department. You could get up to $10,000 depending if it's a very large department in high school. The department chairs, that got pulled, replaced by teacher instructional leaders. There are some good things about teacher instructional leaders potentially, but are they used consistently across all of our 29 campuses? How do we allocate the numbers that are there? So what you have in front of you tonight for approval is a recognition that it's not perfect, and we can't make it perfect when we're in the middle of this year. But one of our commitments to the governing board is that this is the launching pad for getting clarity around what the job description should be for these supplemental stipends, what the accountability is for performance in those areas, and ensuring consistency across our 29 campuses and our online school. We already have some homework that was done by athletics and fine arts as they compared what stipends are for other school districts in the valley related to coaching positions and fine arts. That will inform an update of this. We know that there are some other concerns that have been raised. So, for example, in conversations that I've had, the tutoring hourly amount for teachers hasn't changed in 20 years. It's the same as it's always been. And so when you think about where we are now versus where we are 20 years ago, perhaps we're underpaying in a number of these areas. It's possible we could be overpaying in others. And so this requires a pretty significant overhaul, and that's part of the commitment that we have to ensure consistency, and I call it pruning. I think there's this is just an accumulation of stipends over time that don't always make sense. Might have made sense when they were approved, but now that we have it in this format, we can really go after how do we clean it up, how do we ensure that it's the proper amount, how do we ensure equity for similar types of work, and then ask the question, are we missing something? Because there are also some things that might be additional expectations for employees that people have volunteered to do but really should be paid for. So I think that all of those are on the table for improvement next year. This just captures sort of where we are this year with an acknowledgement that it is not where we expect to be next year. Is that fair?
What he said, yes.
Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells?
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, for that context. I think that's important because if you just take a look at what this document set is, it's eyebrow raising. I am glad to hear there's a review of coaching position stipends. That will be a very interesting report, and I'm anxious to see it when it's ready, coupled with a re-review of where we are today in 2022, coming out of pandemic, the kinds of tasks and responsibilities that some of the staff have probably taken on as a result of staffing shortages, or additional expectations, a strategic plan that now has some, some goal sets that maybe weren't, well, we know they weren't there before. So I appreciate that there will be a recalibration, and I am expecting it to not be a prune, but to be a substantial recultivation in the stipend schedule. And I also want to raise, and this has been raised by the board before, and that is the doctoral stipend and the inequity of that stipend only applying to certain staff and not others. One, and in my view, I will just, and this is just me, if it's going to be there, everyone should get it or no one should get it.
Thank you, Dr. Hart-Wells. And as I understand this, this is going to become part of the interest-based negotiation process, correct? And that's going to be a priority, right?
I hope, I'm sorry to interject here, I hope that this is a little bit of a discussion. This is a burgeoning concern of mine that the IBN process, which does not represent every group of staff that is at the district, will become the voice for everyone. And I realize I'm not maligning the IBN process or the policy of HA. My concern is, for example, coaches. Where do they fall? Who's their advocate? And so I think I would hope that in this process that it does not become it's what the IBM process resulted in, and that everyone's just going to have to live with it. Because I think there are some unique components to some of the staff in the district where that just won't work. And I don't know that undertaking this project just to end up where we are, which is with kind of this amalgam of 10 years of different superintendents' view on how to supplement compensation, and now we have this that doesn't really live well today. So I would just caution that, please.
And I appreciate those comments, genuinely. My concern is that this was brought up in the past, as Dr. Hart-Wells said, and we're still here in this point, this spot, with the same stuff. And so my concern is that we fast track this and make this a priority, because it does impact, there are some equity issues that need to be addressed here. And it does impact our staff members, and I think people are more likely to participate in extra things outside of their contracts when they feel respected. And I think this, financial gain is a form of respect. So if we can make this a priority in our district, and I would like to suggest that it doesn't wait until next year, that if what and when something is completed and improved upon, that this becomes a retroactive compensation for those that it impacts, if that's possible.
Well, I think the challenge with that, and again, we can do just about anything, but the challenge is if some things are overpaid, because they might very well be, I don't want that to be retroactive. I think that's not fair to people. Sure. And I believe that we should treat people, give them a clear understanding of what the expectation is, and meet that expectation. So when you know what it is, and you do that on a go-forward basis, so my expectation would be that we bring this back to you in May or June, so that going into the next school year, we and those who are signing up for this work know what the stipend schedule is, and we have clarity on that on a go-forward basis.
And I was looking at it more from the other perspective of the underpayment or the inequitable payments, not the overpayments. And I do think, I'm going to push on this, I think that we need to do this before the end of the school year and late in the spring, because there are people who make decisions on what's happening the following school year at that time. So I think it's fair to our employees to give them what it's going to look like before they have to make that decision. So sooner than later. Board Member Beckman.
Okay, so if I'm understanding,
Mike.
the question centered around this was not to just define it, but to actually discuss it, to evaluate the documents themselves. Why wouldn't we bring this back?
Why wouldn't we bring this back in February before contract?
So we may be able to do that. I was saying that I wouldn't want it to be later than that. If this was the only thing that Human Resources had to do, if it was the only thing that every other department had to do, we could have a different conversation. We have a lot of moving parts and pieces, and not that this is unimportant. It's important, and yes, part of the reason why it falls in IBN is that there's a dollar figure here. We don't have unlimited resources, so we can't just up all of this and end up with 3% raises across the board, and the additive component, it has to fit within the available resources. And so, yes, I would like it to be earlier. I was just saying that it shouldn't be later than the end of the school year, because people will know. I appreciate the fact that sometimes you make decisions based on, well, if my contract is X and I have a position from a supplemental stipend that gives me Y, then I'll stay there versus taking a position in another district. I appreciate that. That makes sense to me. And I do think that we could move forward on some of the things that might be more pressing. So, for example, like I mentioned, the athletic and fine arts people have already done some initial comparisons. So we might be able to make a recommendation on that, sort of chunk the work. There's an shared interest on the part of the associations and the district to get this in a place where it makes sense, where it's competitive, and where it's defensible. So I think that we can get there, and I don't think we have to wait until the very end to signal what some of that is. It could be chunked over time as well.
Well, and I can appreciate that there's a fair amount of work here, but I do think it's almost necessary before contract. Anytime you're talking about some monetary value and you're dealing with a contract that deals with monetary compensation, you would want to know the whole package. And so I would think that you would want to, if you're going to review this and discuss this, I will not be here, but January or February, the latest. So.
Thank you, Board Member Beckman. Vice President Dr. Hartwell.
I wonder on timing, just to follow up on what Board Member Beckman had commented, and I agree, is the audit is or will be underway soon of the Human Resource Department, and this is something that could be a deliverable, whether it's a policy recommendation or not in the audit, but a deliverable for the HR department, and I believe that's in the performance goals to be done by the end of the calendar year anyway, right? Or that's the hope, is the audit will be done by the end of the calendar year. We'll probably be looking around February at the audit report, which is a great time to also have a revised stipend schedule. And I realize you have a lot of other things on your plate, and that'll be I hope that would also check the boxes in terms of contracts being issued for the subsequent year, and so there's more clarity. I appreciate that because there are dollar amounts, it does fall within that scope, but I also see some of this scope broader. I see the breadth bigger than that, and I don't want that lost, because it appears to kind of be getting lost, where we're at now at least.
Right. Good. All right. At this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve L, the 2022-2023 supplemental salary schedule.
So moved.
Is there a second? I will second it. All in favor to approve the 2022-2023 supplemental salary schedule, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
I need some clarity on this. So the discussion centered around tabling this until the spring, correct? But we're
No.
Okay.
It was just a discussion on this topic.
Because this was for this year, and what we were talking about is revising it for next year for the 23-24 school year, yes.
So I'm a positive. I'm a positive.
Okay, so the motion passes 4-1. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to our action items. And Michael Greenberg has the first one, and
President Snowski, Vice President Hart-Wells, Superintendent Menzel, members of the board. I think this is a fairly straightforward adoption process. I hope there are not too many questions here, but I'm happy to answer as many as I can. Per policy DIE, we did form an audit committee. That audit committee was formed and is required to adhere to open meeting laws and the regulations set out in policy BDE. This specific item falls under policy BDE, where we have to prepare an audit committee charter and present that to the board for final approval. The full committee has had the opportunity, including past and current members, to review this and propose changes. Changes have been made. There were redline versions for points of clarity and discussion, and ultimately it was the decision of the audit committee during the July 26, 2022 meeting just a couple months ago to approve the audit committee charter as presented 5-0 and submit it to the board for final approval. So this is that final review and approval. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them and to the best of my abilities.
I would like to add something here. I really appreciate this. This action item is approval and adoption of the audit committee charter, as Board Member Greenberg said. And as I see it, this is in the name of communication in the public interest, because as I see it, the 9-page overview is an audit of, with key oversight for governance, risk management, internal control mechanisms, and financial accountability. And that's what we've really been working towards as a governing board. Is there anything from that 9-page summary that you feel is vital for the community to know about?
Yes, I think the most important thing here is that audit committees are professional committees. They're found throughout the corporate and government world. These are not committees that are engaged in so-called witch hunting or targeted investigations or politicized investigations. They are comprised of members who have a background in finance, government work, law, as our community, as our committee is. And the goal here is to provide a supporting role to identify high-risk areas, working with an auditor that you may hire or a third party, as we do work with the city of Scottsdale, to identify those high-risk areas, conduct appropriate investigations and audits into them so that we can improve business efficiency, find areas where money may be saved and repurposed, improve efficiency, test controls so that we try to avoid, financial misfeasance or financial malfeasance, apologies, making up words as I go along here, and like issues. Our new committee member did raise a really interesting question. We started off the July 26th meeting discussing how high the supervision goes. Does it go to does the audit committee oversee the administration? Does it oversee the governing board? And my personal view of that, and I think the view of the committee as a whole, if I recall correctly, was it should. If there's a specific issue involving policy violations or concerns, those they can be brought to the audit committee. The board, if board members are involved, since we do have board members on the audit committee, they would abstain from those discussions. And it wouldn't be unusual. We did an audit, an external audit of the use of our technology back in December, and it was pretty much the same process. An independent party, in that case our legal counsel, oversaw it with a third party who had been hired to review those materials to make sure that governing board members did not use their technology and district resources improperly. So it's not unusual. These allegations come up, and I think it would be appropriate for an independent body to be there, like the audit committee. And it also avoids some of the uncomfortable nature of issues like that. If, for example, in that case, you have legal counsel, but of course your legal counsel is hired by your superintendent. There's relationships there, so it can be awkward. The audit committee removes that, removes any issues there, because you do have independent community members with a background in this, and they're the ones conversing with any outside auditing body. So that was an interesting area that we talked about, and I think we had a very fruitful discussion there. But overall, I think that the audit committee charter and policy DIE speak for themselves in the work that we've been doing here.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. Board Member Beckman.
Okay, so thank you for this. A couple of questions. I do see, since we're voting on this, and hopefully you can speak to this, I'm sure it came up. It's a committee that is approved by the governing board. So you have minutes, you set an agenda. Did I miss in here? Are your meetings going to be noticed and open to the public?
Yes. Yeah, they're all noticed. Gladys is excellent at that and puts those out. So it's all on our website, very easy to access. It has its own separate page, so it's not something you don't have to go to the governing board page and look through our regular and special meeting minutes. It's all separated out and easily, and I think it's SEO optimized, so it's pretty easy to Google it and pull it up right away.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions on the topic? Seeing none, I would like to make a motion to approve the adoption of the audit committee charter. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to, yes. There's a request for a 5-minute break? Absolutely. We will take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:50. This meeting reconvenes at 8:52 PM. And we are moving on to action item B, second read and approval of revisions to Governing Board Policy A regarding district mission, goals, and beliefs.
There have been no additional changes since the first read, and we recommend approval.
Approval has been recommended. Does anyone have any questions on the topic? I will just note that I do appreciate the red line copies that our council sends us to be able to see where the changes take place. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion to approve the revisions to Governing Board Policy A regarding district mission, goals, and beliefs passes 5-0. Moving on to action C, second reading approval of revisions Governing Board Policy IGA regarding curriculum development. Dr. Menzel?
There have been no additional recommended changes, and we recommend approval.
Any questions on this particular action item? Seeing that there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve the revisions of Governing Board Policy IGA regarding curriculum development. Is there a second?
Second.
We have 2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And on to D, the second reading approval of revisions to Governing Board Policy IHA regarding basic instructional program.
Again, we've received no requested changes since the first read, and we recommend approval.
Any questions,
I just,
comments?
yeah, I just wish to
Dr.
clarify, the first read, there were shown some, there was a ranking of priority in the subject matters that were going to be removed.
That should have been done.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure that follows.
Sorry about that. Yes, the changes from the first read were incorporated here, but there have been none since it was sent to the governing board for review.
Thank
That's
you
what
for
I
that
meant.
clarification. Thank you.
And I do see that that was addressed. Okay, all in favor, or is there a motion to approve the revisions to Governing Board Policy IHA regarding basic instructional program?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0 as well. Moving on to future items. Any governing board members have requests to place anything on the next agenda? Board Member Beckman.
Okay, yes, I have a couple. I would like to request again that we review our grading policy. Okay, also would like to talk about where we are with the RFP regarding our insurance benefits. And finally, as it came up tonight, I would love to see our dynamic new SOL principal, Mr. Noonan, tell us about SOL and maybe some goals and plans to develop the online learning platform here in Scottsdale.
Thank you, Board Member Beckman. I'm not sure who is next. Vice President Dr. Hartwells.
All right. Okay, thank you, President Sinowski. The light won't go off. First, I want to thank the administration for scheduling the briefings here in the next couple of weeks on energy management here at the district. I'm looking forward to those conversations, believe it or not. I also understand, and I just clarified, Dr. Menzel sent this out in his weekly update to the community, but that the state assessment results from the spring will be presented in the next board meeting. And I want to thank Dr. Bachna actually for waiting, because the Department of Education actually did not release the full data set at the outset. And so I think there was some chatter in the social media sphere with the data that was at the time incomplete. So I appreciate their patience ensuring that the data that we receive is of its highest integrity. also look forward to that report. I would like to also thank and request, if we could, a report out on the attendance and participation at the District College Fair for our 6 high schools that's being held in October. I think that was a great idea. I'm not aware that that's happened before, but I applaud all those that are putting that together. And 2 things. One is this status on the data dashboard. We could have some presentation on where that's at.
We're going to get some of that on the 4th.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that's a little overdue. And then the other request I have it sounds like maybe some of this is already being undertaken, and that is an assessment of a review of the sports offerings that are provided by gender in both middle school and high school. And that not just a presentation, but an accompanying report, a written report at each of by building, what's being offered by building at each of the schools and by gender. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Dr. Wells. Board Member Greenberg.
Thank you. I would like to second Board Member Beckman's request on the RFP process. As we determined, it wasn't something that would really fall within the audit committee, so I would like to learn more about that. And as I noted in an email a couple weeks ago, I think frankly it was around Labor Day, so everyone was out and busy, but whether we have plans in place to retain someone who specializes in medical plans to help us with that RFP process and understanding it, because I don't have any expertise in that area, and I know it would be nice to see have an independent party that works for us, assess these proposals.
That's why we hired Siegel to help put it together, but Shannon will prepare an update and let you know and respond to that, because it's moving fast now.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes. Any other requests? You guys covered some of mine, so thank you. Seeing that there are no more, we are going to go on to dates of upcoming meetings. Next meeting is Tuesday, October 4th. There will be a lot of good information shared at that meeting, and that will be at 6 p.m. at the MDA, followed by, we'll have a fall break in there too. Tuesday, October 18th, when we return from fall break, 6 p.m., that will be a regular governing board meeting at Coronado, here at Coronado High School. And I ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 The meeting is adjourned at 9 p.m.